Spending more than half of his life on death row, Taborn Honey is set to die by lethal injection.
But the worst thing about what this does to the victim families of the person who is murdered is ask them to prolong their healing process for decades. Wait till we kill the guy, then you'll feel better.
When I heard that Taborn Honey was going to be executed, I wanted to do everything that I could to save his life. I've been following death penalty action for about a year or so now, following other executions, signing petitions against other executions. And I reached out, and that first Zoom call found out that the current voice for anti-death penalty in Utah had become dormant, and we needed to reignite that.
When it became clear that Utah was about to carry out its first execution in 14 years, Death Penalty Action was invited to help elevate the voices of Utahns who oppose executions. With less than 1 week's notice, working with faith leaders, legal professionals, civil and human rights leaders, and others, Death Penalty Action helped local organizers create a series of public events worthy of media coverage, earning more than $1 million worth of mass media exposure for our message.
Capital punishment is an offense against the inviolability of life and the dignity of the human person, which does not render justice to the victims and their families, but rather fosters vengeance.
Conservatives are concerned about the death penalty because even when culpability is not in question, capital punishment is arbitrarily and unfairly administered by government.
And rather than spend $200,000 on a drug that, when used as prescribed here, is fatal, might that money be better used for restitution and healing?
We've got a few minutes for one-on-ones, and then we're going to gather. We're going to walk up the stairs and deliver our letter and our petition to the governor.
Share this with you. Thank you.
We are here outside of the prison, Utah prison, to give a voice for Taborn Honey.
I come all the way down here from Ohio, not to cry with you, but to try with you. Let's try to end this.
Everyday Utahns who saw our messages in the media were inspired to find and join the protests and come together as a new set of leaders for a newly invigorated state anti-death penalty organization. The death penalty is a failed government policy morally, economically, and socially, and is counter to the teachings of most faith traditions. Join us. Together, we can make the difference. Utah was about to carry out its first
Well, welcome everybody. Here we are. Wrongful Conviction Day. I'm here with Bonowitz with Death Penalty Action, and I'm here with Charles Keith, our Impacted Communities Liaison, and Lamont Hunter, who hopefully will also soon be an Impacted Communities Liaison. He's one of Ohio's death row survivors, and we're talking today about wrongful convictions because it's Wrongful Conviction Day. Now, you might be wondering why we just showed a video about a guy who was guilty. That's just because it's one of our recent videos, and Death Penalty Action opposes the death penalty in all cases. And that's why we want to make sure that we're talking about all the kinds of cases and how the death penalty risks the execution of people who are innocent. And when we get caught up in just talking about the innocence cases, we lose sight of the fact that while they execute the guilty, it seems to make it, it makes it a little bit harder for us to talk about every case if we only are going to talk about the innocence cases, and if that's the biggest profile that's happening. And we've seen that, for example, last week when they were executing Marcellus Williams in Missouri. That was the only case that a lot of people were talking about, even though there was another execution going on at exactly the same time. And there were 5 executions in a 7-day period. actually 6 in a 10-day period. They just had another execution last night, October 1st. Most of these people are guilty, but there's always something going on in that's worthy of conversation about these cases. And sometimes those run through also in the wrongful convictions cases, but often not. Often there's something else is going on. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. With me, and I want to welcome and thank Charles Keith and Lamont Hunter, and we're going to hear a little bit about what brings them to this conversation, and also in the comments section on the Facebook screen on the Death Penalty Action Facebook page. That's where you'll find some of the links that we're going to talk about to some of these other cases. So first, let me invite Charles and then Lamont to introduce themselves and give us a couple minutes about what brings them into this picture. So Charles, let's go to you first.
Charles Keith here, the Impacted Communities Liaison for Death Penalty Action. What brings me into this was when my brother was convicted of a crime that he didn't commit. And, normally you would assume that person, even if it goes to trial, that they're going to find him innocent because there's no evidence on him. And then you start understanding what wrongfully convicted really means, and when you can't find the evidence, when they can't show you the evidence, things that you look for that confirms that person committed that crime, they don't have that. So if they don't have that, then how do they have this person incarcerated? And, this is something that I've had to go back and explain to my family. And, I had talked to you earlier, Abe, and, I'd have to say that, my voice, it has to come back and speak for those families because, I thought about what I had gone through and what my family had gone through, but a lot of these other families have not had that voice. And so, I'm talking to those families now because I can imagine what your fights were like. I can imagine what the households were like. I can imagine all of that, trying to fight for your loved one. It's a different thing when you're coming from it from a family perspective. Trying to establish leadership, trying to establish some type of order, trying to establish so many things in your family to even try to consider yourself still a family. And you still have that loved one that's incarcerated that you don't get to see, you don't get to hug, and you don't get a chance to associate with. They've actually cut that person off. I mean, you're talking about the death penalty, killing off people, families, and everybody in so many different ways. It's just hard to really describe it. And that's why everybody has so many different stories out there. So I guess that we come all the way back to that very topic of the death penalty, killing us off in our own country.
Wow. All right, well, Lamont, let me introduce you and welcome you and invite you to introduce yourself a bit as well. Lamont Hunter, everybody.
Hey, everybody. This is Lamont Hunter, death row survivor from Ohio's death row. And I want to say this real quick to my brother, Charles. I stand in solidarity with you, brother, and in the fight for bringing your brother home, man. He needs to be home, man. And I stand in solidarity with you. So what brings me to the conversation today is my experience of being wrongfully convicted here in Hamilton County under a overzealous prosecutor's office here in Hamilton County when Joe Dieters was the prosecutor there. But Charles talked a lot about briefly about evidence, and that's part of the problem that the judicial system is afflicted with. Evidence is in how shabby evidence could become written in stone in the court of law, in the arena of the courtroom. They convicted me back in 2006. Actually, I want to make a note of this today. October the 2nd is the day I arrived in 2007 on death row. which is ironic. I just wanted to shine a light on that. But yeah, the evidence is how it's perceived. The judge and the courts perceive it when presented by the prosecutor in a favorable way. If you're sitting at the defense table, you don't the scales are unbalanced. So you already up against a monster sitting at that defense table. So it's I could talk so much about what happened and what transpired in my case. And I'm sure we will get into that. But I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a death row survivor of Ohio's death row. And yeah, I just want to acknowledge today being Wrongful Conviction Day, and let the people know who's wrongfully convicted that we stand in solidarity with them, and we're fighting out here, against this mess.
Amen. I put a link to the petition that we have for Kevin Keith and Lamont to your GoFundMe, because that's really the page that we have right now where you tell your story a little bit, and there's links there to more, and you can search on some of this. But today, we're not going to be on here terribly long, and I want to make sure that we're talking about the issues around this. As much as, you two are both examples of both wrongful conviction in Lamont's case and how it impacts families that are connected to it. One of the things about Charles is that he's the person that had to do the investigation that proved his brother's innocence and then find other people to talk about it. Lamont, you had to struggle to get anybody to listen to you, right?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that we've done at Death Penalty Action is also, when people call us, one of the things I could do is refer them to Charles and hopefully soon also you, Lamont, to say, let these guys share with you what their experience was, and here are some steps you could take if you're advocating for your innocent friend or your innocent loved one on death row or otherwise, right? These same issues are, it's a little bit different when you're facing execution, but, Charles is still working to free his brother, even though he's no longer facing execution. He's on death by incarceration, but we're still focusing there. So, Lamont, let's start with you. Can you just share a little bit about how were you able to get anybody to pay attention to your situation?
Yeah, it was very stressful, Abe, to say the least. Very traumatizing. Going through that mess, being wrongfully convicted, and just pleading your case in the courts is an issue on itself. And nobody's listening, and they're just over talking you. And the attorneys that represented me in state court did a shabby at best a job and represent me. First, my trial attorney just completely abandoned me and didn't get a representation out of him to save my life. But my appeals went through the court system, the appeal process. The appeal process is a journey of itself. You go through the state process first, and you got a couple of levels of appeals and direct appeal and post-conviction appeal in state court. Both of those failed. It took years for them to get to the courts. It's so slow. The process is so slow. And then finally, my case was denied by the Ohio Supreme Court in state court. And so after that, you move your appeals move on to habeas corpus in federal court. And once I got crossed the threshold into federal court, I got a new set of attorneys that's still with me today, 11 years now. And I can't say enough about these attorneys, and one in particular, Erin Gallagher Barnhart. She came onto the case and gave it the the eyes that in the review that it's supposed to have. And she listened and she heard me, investigated, and joined my case and believed that I was innocent. And she advocated from the beginning to prove that. And of course, the evidence is the main thing that you have to attack in any case to prove your innocence, or get to justice, whatever that means in this country. But so finally, once I'm in the federal court, I say didn't take long. Once we scratched the surface in the federal judge who granted us discovery, we found evidence that the prosecutor withheld from us that actually proved I was innocent. And it's like a light switch, came on once I got in federal court and had the proper advocacy on my behalf in them courts. And that led us to a new trial motion, a new trial petition, and getting that granted. Coming back from death row to Hamilton County for a new trial, and the prosecutor wanting to save face and get me to take the plea so that they won't look, like the culprits that they are, and hiding evidence and not being forthcoming, that convicted me. And so they was adamant about me taking a plea, and I wanted the courts to weigh in. And so we did. My attorneys, we go to court. The judge granted a new trial motion, and actually the prosecutor joined the motion because they said I do deserve a new trial. And behind the scenes of that, they were constantly in communication with us and saying, "Let's take the plea. You can go home right now. We'll open the door right now if you just take the plea, so that we won't have to go through this in the public's eye." And so I told him I wanted the judge to weigh in first, and the judge, we moved from the new trial motion to the bond hearing procedure, and they challenged us on that because I didn't take the plea, and so they challenged us on the bond, and we won on that too. We got granted a bond, but unfortunately the bond was $500,000 with a lot of restrictions, and the $500,000 we couldn't make. So I made an educated decision after consulting with my family and my attorneys, and I just thought that I deserved my freedom back right now, and I entered a plea negotiations with them, and decided to go ahead and plead to a lesser offense. And it comes back and haunt me some days as well, that plea that I took from them, because although it was lesser offenses and I got my life back, I'm free. There's still struggles that I'm faced with daily because of what I went through, what they took me through. My record, I lost everything. 18 years, 17 and a half years on death row. I lost everything. And I get my freedom, but I have to start from the bottom, from the floor, and try to piece my life back together in whatever fashion and form I can, and it's hard, so that's what brings me here today. And I stand in solidarity with everybody who support abolition in this country and wrongful convictions. And there's another thing I want to mention that might help in this. We need to shine a light on this thing called absolute immunity that these prosecutors and DA's offices around the country are protected by. They're protected by absolute immunity, meaning they can't be held liable for anything they do under their job description. Even if they're caught cheating and lying and stealing and all of that, they're still protected by absolute immunity, and that should be being attacked in this country. Thanks, Abe.
Well, that's exactly right. Thanks, Lamont, for putting yourself back on there. I didn't realize until you mentioned it right at the beginning of your remarks that today is the anniversary of the date in 2007 that you went to death row in Ohio for a crime you did not commit. I want to also mention, a lot of people talk about the exonerated. Exonerated means that your conviction has been vacated, and you are, it's considered as if you didn't do anything, and because you took a plea, you're not considered the exonerated. Even within the innocence network, we have a different term they use for folks like you, which is freed people, right? Not you've been freed, but you haven't been exonerated yet, even though, and as you just explained, the evidence is that there was no crime. This is another one of these cases of a child died, and there was just by the circumstances, somebody said, well, he must have been killed and you must have done it. And then they came up with the evidence, which turned out to not be evidence. So yet again, there was no crime, and yet you did the time. And because you made a choice to not wait a couple more years, possibly on death row, you're freed and you're home, but you still have a conviction on top of you.
And it brings a whole new set of challenges that people don't recognize the intricacies of this, transitioning from that mindset that you're in. You're forced to live on death row, waking up every day, going to sleep every night, facing execution. And that traumatizes a person. And then you take that, and they just throw you out here to the wolves on the streets and say, okay, no apology, no nothing, no compensation, no nothing, and say, go figure it out. And that's I don't wish that on nobody, man. And Abe and Charles, you guys have been supporters of mine, and I want to say I can't thank you enough for you guys recognizing and supporting me, man. In my transition from that to this, it's hard. It's a struggle every day, and with the struggle that came along with it was of nobody's foreseeing that my knee gave out on me, and I couldn't work. I'm just now healing from the knee replacement surgery. So things like that, people need to be aware of, and not too judgmental of the people like me, myself, who was wrongfully convicted and now forced to transition back into our society.
Sure. I'm going to just share real quick. I put a link to this in the chat there on the Death Penalty Action Facebook page. This is streaming on a couple of different Facebook pages, and our YouTube and our Twitter, I think. So, but you can find this if you just go to GoFundMe and search Lamont Hunter. There's two active GoFundMes that you can chip into. It shows here nearly $5,000 on an $18,000 goal from only 127 people. That money's long gone, right? This is what Lamont has been living on. So it's not like he's sitting on all this cash. We need this on a regular basis, more donations. So if you can, we invite you to chip in, not just on this, but there's many other pages as well for other people who have been exonerated or who are struggling in there because they've been touched by the death penalty. Unfortunately, Death Penalty Action's webpage got infected and we had to take the whole thing down, and we're in the process of rebuilding it. So I can't point you to our whole list of a couple dozen such GoFundMes, but there's the link to Lamont's. So thank you.
I appreciate that.
Of course, and Lamont is also available to tell his story in Zooms and in person, and so there's lots of opportunities, and so too is Charles, and there's many other people too. So, Charles, let me let you set up a little bit your situation. Did you want to show the video?
Well, yeah, you can show the video.
Okay, well, let me get that in front of me, and while I'm doing that, just introduce it a little bit.
Okay, but I wanted to go back to what Lamont was talking about, because he's being incarcerated, against his will, and then you have to imagine that the family member that's out here on the outside fighting, seeing all the things that they're fighting against, that's keeping that person incarcerated, fighting against that prosecutor who have lied and fabricated. The jury, who is not well educated on the death penalty. All you got to get there to say is guilty, and it's all over. The jury is the only thing that I've seen in the criminal justice system that you can attach and detach. And those are the people that say whether you go home or not. The very people that you detach. Now they're gone. They faded away. Now you got to fight the system.
That's right.
But if the jury says not guilty, you can go home. Not the prosecutor. The jury says you can go home. I don't care what the prosecutor says. You can go home. So it's how they're manipulating, you know, that hypnosis piece, how they've got that jury spellbound. And then you're detached. And now you really fight the system. And that's where the family comes in, fighting that system. And they always talk about a civic duty. What about that civic duty to produce evidence? What about that civic duty to keep the law? They used to say, where there's doubt, you're out. What happened to those sayings? Right. And my brother and I are talking. He says, Charles, you know, everybody's been telling me a lot of things. He says, you know, I'm starting to hear what you're talking about, that crime bill. He says, you look at the plethora of all these convictions after 1994. He says, there's something holding me in here because my attorneys are doing a damn good job. All these motions being denied, all this stuff being denied. You know, what is it? What power has the death penalty picked up to be able to convict people with no evidence, make the type of deals that they're making with Lamont, and execute innocent people? What kind of power is it? It's that crime bill. And my brother's convinced on that. And, you know, and he and I are in big discussions about how to address it and dismantle it. And the relief it should give to death row inmates and those that are looking at those that are actually incarcerated, life without parole. It was devastating on that particular group.
There's so much we could talk about here. We made a little video about Charles and his experience, so we're going to show that now, and then we'll be back to talk some more.
Well, I had a brother that was on death row back in 1994. He spent 16 years on death row. Took me a lot of time to figure out how to get him out. I learned a lot about the law. I learned a lot about the death penalty. And getting him off death row in 2010. And it also gave me the skills to come out here and help others that were on death row that needed my help. The death penalty drove me crazy, but it's a crazy goodness because I learned so much about the law. Governor Strickland took him off death row based on an innocent claim. They gave him life without parole, and I've been fighting life without parole for the past 12 years. Without a father, I was obligated. I mean, I got pushed into it. I never even thought about being a father figure because I was always a big brother. And now coming through something like this, I had to be more than a big brother. I had to actually go out and fight like this was my kid. And I lacked knowledge and awareness about the death penalty, so I started studying law books. I said, I got to read the same books that the lawyers are reading so I can understand the language, the lingo, what's going on, and I have to prepare myself for this long haul of fighting the death penalty. And I tell people I wasn't educated by Ohio State. I was educated by the state of Ohio. There's no rules in this game, and there's no manual that you can go how to fight the death penalty. We don't get that as laymen, so to speak. Lawyers may get it, but we don't. So we have to learn to fight in such a different way.
We're here today with our message, standing in solidarity as a people.
This is what democracy looks like!
This is about my 5th time coming down here, and each time there has been an execution. It's painful each time because you know you're taking of a life, and that person has family.
There's going to be another murder taking place, another legal lynching.
I think about the people, the workers on the other side. I mean, we over here, we're witnesses, we're abolitionists, we're against it, but those on the other side are part of it. In order to sit on a death penalty case, you have to be for the death penalty. So imagine you've got 12 people sitting there that's for the death penalty. You're most surely going to be convicted because the prosecutor is for the death penalty. So he's using you to make sure he gets a conviction. It's like you're going up against a lynch mob.
What do we want? Abolition. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Abolition.
We must abolish the death penalty.
The racism of this nation draws a direct line from slavery to Jim Crow to mass incarceration to the death penalty. And the death penalty is, simply put, a legalized modern-day version of lynching.
And when you look at the government, see, they're killing in the name of the church. And that's why we've taken our fight to the church. That's why we've asked the pastors to come out. This is wrong. This is thou shalt not kill.
Indeed, the death penalty can only be abolished when the bloodthirsty among us, the church, lose our addiction to death and murder.
We're in a space where we have a Supreme Court that doesn't care. The rails have been greased to the death chamber, and that's what we're seeing now.
We must not allow this wicked system to shed any more blood in our names.
God gave us life. It's sacred. How can you take away anybody's life when you would not want that to happen to you also?
Are you fatigued by any of this?
Yes, I'm beat down. You know, I started this at the age of 34. I'm 64 now. And, you know, so many things have happened, but they didn't think it was going to get this far, this deep. They don't think families, poor families such as myself, the Reeds, the Joneses and those folks, they don't think we're going to come out and fight. How could we? How would we know how?
They all deserve life.
You're trying to save a person's life. It's a lot different than, you know, you see a person in a car or you see him drowning. You got opportunity. I told my brother I would never, you know, abandon him.
Well, I get chills every time I see that.
Imagine mine.
Yeah.
You know, me and my brother, we're in discussion. We've looked at his case in every way imaginable. And, you know, I've been telling him about that violent crime bill. It added something to the death penalty that changed things. It made it very difficult, very difficult. And it's emphasizing anything that happened with women and children. And he and I are in deep discussion with this. And he says, Charles, look at all the incarcerations after 1994. He said, you got to realize the impact that the president's word had on the community and the impact it had on juries and how the prosecutors can now use juries as weapons once convicted. And this guy's bringing you to court. Imagine this guy's bringing you to court with no evidence. He knows it. No evidence. He gets past that special jury of indictment. He gets you indicted, and all he has to do is sell his narrative. Now, for you to get out, you're going to get out on a narrative? You're not going to get out on a narrative, and there's nothing to test, as in the Julius Jones case, as in the Rodney Reed case, all these cases that don't have definitive evidence that's saying these people committed these crimes. The way they did Lamont was horrible. They know that man was innocent, but instead of them saying, hey, you know, we wrongfully convicted this guy and pay that man for what they did to him. But look at the scoundrels they've become. That crime bill has allowed them to become scoundrels. It's allowed them to take people. You're talking about the death penalty with no evidence. You're going to take my life with no evidence? My brother's been in there. Ivan Cantu. I can go on with names of families. And man, I hurt every time there's an execution because I said, this is the part that my family, we missed that bullet. We missed it just by a narrow window. But I've gone past and beyond that with other families. And I know how those families feel when they're speechless, powerless, penniless. And you're holding my loved one with no evidence. So the only thing I can say is they're innocent. And today, that sounds like the most dumbest thing you could ever say to anybody is that you're innocent. Well, where's the evidence for me to argue against? There is none. It's just your story versus their story. And after all, who are you but that convicted felon? And they're the state.
Right.
You know, Charles, it's so powerful whenever you get going. You know, and I'm sorry that each time, to both of you guys, whenever we ask you to tell your story, we also ask you to put yourselves back into the space that in many ways you're still living in. Can we talk a little bit about how this impacts families? You mentioned the Joneses, and you know, we worked so closely with Rodney Reed's family in Texas, and Melissa Lucio's family in also in Texas, and a bit with the Jones family in Oklahoma, and you know, we're working with folks here in Ohio. Maybe Lamont, I'll let you go first and just share a little bit about how this impacted your family. What do families go through? Because you know, they say often if you've got a loved one in prison, their family's in prison with them, and that's extra true for people who are on death row, innocent or not. But if it's innocent, and they all knew you were innocent, talk about that a little bit, please.
Sure. Thanks, Abe. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to be born into a very beautiful family, man. We're very supportive. We very supportive of each other. We love each other. We a faith-based family. We're just, you know, salt of the earth people, man. And unfortunately, this case, my case, and my situation, my circumstances are not unique in this country. Look at my brother Charles over there, explaining, you know, how it affects his family. But my family, man, it was rough because my history and my background and my family, I was kind of a linchpin that like my siblings. I got 5 other siblings, and I was like I'm like almost exactly in the middle of all of them, and as far as chronologically, and a lot of the times they would come to me when we're all having issues with each other, and we have our dysfunction like any other family, but we love each other and we support each, still do. And when this happened to me, of course, their support just got stronger, and they dug in deeper. It's humbling to go through something like I went through, and it's still experiencing, because it's going to be with me for the rest of my life. It traumatized me and my family. It's going to be with us for the rest of our lives. But what you just said, Abe, if you're incarcerated, the people who love you, friends, family, and support you, are going to go through it with you. And being the person that's incarcerated, I'm gonna tell you something that I rarely share with people. Early on, we just talked about the anniversary of the date that I arrived on death row, and this date, October 2nd, 2007. Shortly after that, being on death row and seeing and understanding and getting a close-up perspective on this entity that I'm up against, this fight, this evil, wicked entity that I'm up against. It hit me like a ton of bricks, and me knowing the family, the support that I have, I know they're going to be with me through this. And I almost had the devil works in the mysterious. The devil was working. He had me ready to cut my family off, to keep cut communication off with my family, to keep them from going through this wicked, hellish journey, traumatizing journey that was ahead of me. But I knew by doing that, I would hurt my mother, especially my mother, even worse, by cutting off all communication. So I had to resist that temptation that the devil was putting in my mind, in my psyche. And not only that, I had to focus, block out a lot of stuff that was going on these streets and with my family, just to focus, just to focus. In that video that you just showed, that Charles was when Charles, the brother, so eloquently put it, that he wasn't educated by Ohio State. He was educated by the state of Ohio. I am a living, breathing witness. Amen to that, brother. I had to focus my intellect and block out a lot of distraction and study and learn and earn a paralegal degree to understand the language, because we what people don't understand in this country is, in the courtrooms around this country, that's the weapon of choice, their language. They weaponize the language back and forth from the prosecutor, the judge, and the defense attorney, but the defendant is not educated in the language going over our heads. I didn't understand none of the shit until I had to study on death row, under a wrongful conviction, under a sentence of death, and earn a paralegal degree in order to learn the language and understand what I was dealing with. And also to help my attorneys represent me, advocate for me in the court of law. So in my family, I wouldn't have been able to do that, earn this, learn and study, and get this paralegal degree without my family paying for it. It was a correspondence course. So the support from families and how it affects families is huge. We're still dealing with it. And I'm home. I've been home over a year now, and we're still dealing with it, the trauma that it's affected us with.
June was a year since you've been home. So, now it's July, August, September, October. We're going on to 16 months being home after 18 years of incarceration for a crime you had nothing to do with. It wasn't even a crime, actually, for something that happened that they made into a crime.
Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, I just got a text message from Antoinette Jones, just checking in because we were all working together around the Emmanuel Littlejohn case in Oklahoma last week. Now, Emmanuel wasn't innocent in the sense of he wasn't part of the crime, but he didn't kill anybody. And we can see what's happening with their family. We can see, the Jones family worked so hard to free Julius Jones, and he had to accept doing life without parole in order to get the commutation that he got at the last minute, which, that's a whole nother, a book and a movie or two that needs to be made about that case. While you were talking, I was thinking about other families and what's happened to people. And we've seen it. Charles and I especially have been on the road in getting deeply involved in cases like the Rodney Reed case, and working with Rodney's family. His mother has been very ill recently. His brother, actually several brothers, are ill, and Roderick has been really struggling to maintain a job, and because he's wanted to be able to be free to advocate for his brother. This is one of the things that happened to Charles too. Charles gave up so much in life because he needed to be free to do the work to advocate for his brother, and that's where, so I put the link. Sorry, I'm distracted by a phone call there. I put the link in on the Facebook page, Death Penalty Action Facebook page, for the GoFundMe for Roger Reed to help support them. We worked very, very closely with the family of Melissa Lucio, who they struggled to be present for Melissa, another person where a child ended up dead, but there was no crime, and yet somebody had to go to death row for it. And we're still waiting for her to be freed. By the way, there's links to the petitions for Anthony Apanovich and Kevin Keith and Melissa Lucio and Rodney Reed. There's so many more, but those are the cases where we've been deeply invested in supporting. It tends to, where Death Penalty Action tends to get involved is when there has been an execution date set. and then we jump in much more deeply. We help with any case that we can, especially if it's a death penalty case. But those happen to be the ones that were mostly deeply involved. Anthony Apanovich has not had an execution date yet, but he is somebody, actually the first prisoner that ever visited on death row. I've known Anthony for like 30 years. Now, knew Anthony while you were on death row, Lamont.
Absolutely.
He is 36, 37 years now. He was actually home and freed on house arrest because his conviction was thrown out. And then the state challenged it. He's got DNA that shows he didn't do the rape. And if he didn't do the rape, then he didn't do the murder. And the state appealed on a technicality. The situation in his case is the prisoner didn't ask for the DNA testing. The state and they hid it, and then suddenly it showed up. Somebody found it in a desk drawer, and they faxed it to the defense, and suddenly the defense had it, and they raised it. But because of the technicality in Ohio law, he didn't have the right to use it. The state challenged his conviction being thrown out and won. I'll never forget this. Your attorney, Aaron, called me and said, "Oh my gosh, Tony's conviction just got reinstated." Tony was out. I called Tony. It was a Thursday morning. I said, "Tony, you heard about this?" Of course he had. And then I said, what are you going to do? He said, "I don't know." But the next morning, like 20 different police cars came and grabbed him and held him in his yard for about 20 minutes. And then that was a Friday morning. He was back on death row by Monday. Okay.
Doesn't that sound like bullying?
It's atrocious. That's atrocious what they did to him. I was there. I was there for the whole thing. I've witnessed it up close and personal. And he's the only person in this country that this has ever happened to. And if that's not bloodthirsty, if that's not
bullying,
evil, I don't know what is.
Bullying is outlawed in our country.
Right.
See, that's why I'm talking about bullying. So here they come out here and they're bullying people, and then you know that this man is absolutely innocent. You understand what I'm saying? They don't understand. Maybe the people don't understand what death row means. Death row isn't the place where you go do time. We hear people did 20 years, 30 years. Death row is not a place where you go do time. You're not looking for an out date.
It's a dark place. It's a dark place. And I've been up close and personal with them comrades that's there. I don't judge. They don't judge. Nobody ever judged each other, but it's a dark place. And people lose their mind.
My brother said you go to the road to die, not to serve.
That's right. People lose their mind. People have mental health issues that exacerbates while sitting there on death row without getting the proper treatment. And it's dark. It's just a dark place. No hope. Yeah. You can't find hope on death row. It's a jail inside of a jail or under a jail. It's
some place that they would never put any of their worst relatives.
Exactly. And I just I was there, man, for that, and I witnessed that with Tony and Tony Apanovich. We call him Slim, but yeah, man, it's I witnessed that and seen how do we stop these people? How do we stop the absolute immunity that they're protected by? Wouldn't allow them to do this shit.
And I tell you what, Joe Biden, you gotta look at that crime bill, my brother. I could not get this guy to focus on it. Now he says, "Chuck, there's something that's keeping me in here because my lawyers, everybody's done great work." Yeah. And he finally found out it's that crime bill. They made the difference. Why would that crime bill affect the death penalty? We already have the death penalty.
Once Bill Clinton, once the legislature crafted that bill and Bill Clinton signed it into law, this is what affected. This is how it affected death penalty. What we say on the road is, and the lawyers understand that if you're under the old law, which is the law before the crime bill was enacted and signed into law, then your appeals are the process is not simultaneously but consecutively. One appeal go through and then the other appeal go through. But under the new law, after Bill Clinton signed that crime bill into law, then your appeals are going through concurrently. It speeds the process up so that, people are getting executed quicker than it would normally and not getting the fair review under the old law. And they ain't rushing it. They're not rushing. That allowed Texas, the number one killer in this country, Texas, that allowed them to rapidly, they changed their constitutional laws under that crime bill in the state of Texas, and they execute people. Like one time they executed, I don't know, 3 people in a week.
Hey, do you realize once they get, it's not so much the conviction, because they know once they get you indicted, you're convicted. Because they got you indicted on no evidence.
Absolutely. And that's why there's no rich people on any death row in any state in this country. There's no rich people. You will never find a person
if you had any money when you were arrested, it's all gone by the time you're convicted. That's how we got things here. Then without the capital, get the punishment. Guys, it's like I'm a little, I want to say, don't get you guys started, because look what happens. And that's really what we need to be doing. We need to be seeing this passion. I want to know. I see Antoinette in the chat on the Antoinette Jones, Julius Jones' sister, is watching on the Facebook. Hi, Antoinette. And I should have called you to have you on this. We just kind of made this impromptu, and we're talking about wrongful conviction with people with Lamont Hunter, who is not formally exonerated. He's a freed person because he took a plea. He had the option, face retrial and maybe another wrongful conviction, or there's the door, you could walk out today, right? And then Charles, of course, his brother is innocent was just less than 2 weeks from execution in Ohio when Governor Strickland commuted his sentence to life without parole. And then, and now he's got death by incarceration. And with the clemency petition on the governor's desk, and the governor's not acting on it. And that's with the power of Kim Kardashian and all the focus that she could put in, and the podcast she made in his case. And that's really the thing. What we're seeing, it's going to be very interesting to watch and see what happens in Robbie Robertson's case. I want to put that link in the chat here too. Robbie Robertson there's 2 people scheduled to be executed next in this country at the same time. In Alabama, Derek Dearman, who is guilty and has waived his appeals and wants to be executed in order to be released from the suffering that he is undergoing and everybody's undergoing on death row in Alabama, which is horrific. And then at the same time, Robbie Robertson, who is another person like Melissa Lucio, like Lamont Hunter. The child ended up dead. Somebody had to go to death row for it, but it turns out there was no crime. And in Robbie Robertson's case, it was they used the shaken baby syndrome.
Mm-hmm. Which is junk science, by the way. Which is junk science. We
right.
Confirmed that in my case, in my appeals. They're changing the terminology in that field of forensics because it's junk science. The advocates for it, they are changing the terminology from shaken baby syndrome to head trauma abuse, because of it's. I can go all into it and educate on it because I went through it and I lived it through it. But
what do you want to say about that, Lamont?
Yeah, the science community. Okay, I'll just say this. I'll just put it this way. This is the judicial system that we're fighting against. Okay, say for instance, you're charged with a crime, sort of like we're talking about shaken baby crime. Okay, and that's a not DNA. It's not DNA, but it's still forensics, head trauma forensics, brain neurologist expert field of science. So you need experts to come to court and testify why they believe this child had trauma done to its head. Regardless of the story that was told by the defendant, they chose not to believe it and went on with their own self. Okay, now say for instance, the defense hired an expert and the prosecutor brings in an expert. and you're sitting them, and they're testifying in front of the jury, or whatever the juror of facts is, the 3-judge panel like I had, or jury, 12-panel member jury, and say for instance this is the scenario that we're dealing with. Okay, the prosecutor put their expert up to testify. He's completely wrong in his theology, his theories of the science that he's trying to present. He's completely wrong. But the way he delivered it, he's convincing. He's a great orator. He can speak well. He can connect with his audience, which is the jury, or the trier of fact, which is the 3-judge panel. And the defense expert is spot on. They're spot on. They're completely right in their presentation, but they're not very good at presenting it humanly. Like, they can't connect with the jury, and the jury is taking this evidence and they're not believing you because you're not presenting it in a fashion where you can connect with them. And they choose to believe the prosecutor's expert because he's very charismatic. He's very charming, and he can connect with the audience. But the science that he's presenting to them is completely wrong. They're not experts. They don't understand. They understand how you can make them feel and believe. And that's what we're up against. And what's in the balance is a person's life. And the person's life is getting messed over because of just that alone. The difference between how this evidence is getting presented. And now you're stuck under a sentence of death because your expert didn't present the evidence, which is correct, in a fashion where he can reach the audience, which is the jury.
It's like using prognosis and diagnosis in the criminal justice system. This is not the medical field.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's how we get the wrongful convictions. That's how we get a lot of the wrongful convictions around this country. And I try to explain that as simple as possible. And
your average jurors are patients.
Absolutely.
So when they come out and given a prognosis and a diagnosis, they've got them.
Absolutely.
You know, nobody's even interested in evidence anymore. So they say, hey, it sounds believable. Absolutely. And if you were to take each juror and ask them, why did you find this person guilty? They wouldn't have a slightest clue.
Absolutely. And it's just human nature. It's just human nature to sort of lean towards how a person make you feel than what they're saying to you. You know, it's just human nature, you know, and there's studies going on about this stuff, and there should be, and a lot of that shit shouldn't be allowed in an arena of the courtrooms in these countries where a life is in the balance, man. And the life is in the balance, and behind that life is a whole plethora, a family of lives that's being afflicted by this shit.
Well, see, you know, they don't understand what struggle means. Struggle didn't just start. You're looking at generational struggle. And now we're struggling through this death penalty phase. We done went through civil rights, slavery. You know, we done gone through all these struggles.
That's right, Charles.
And now we're struggling just to save our life now, and lives of our loved ones. And we're doing it with poorly educated people. You know, we come from a loving family, but when the death penalty hit us, we had no money. We had no resources. We had nowhere to turn. We had absolutely nothing.
With no love. You can't go in there with no love. You got to have that money.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Like Abe just said, and that generational curse, that generational trauma that you talked about, man. Hey Charles, I'm living it every day, man. I'm seeing my children. I'm seeing how it affect my mama. When I came home, unfortunately, I lost my father. My mother and father was 58 years married when he passed away in 2018. Sadly, he didn't get to see me come home to him. But my mother, she's still with us, thank God, and she's 85 this year. She just had a birthday in August. And when I came home to her, Charles, we were all different people. You know, this affected us in a manner where it changed us. You know, our dynamic we still a family unit, but it just changed us. You know, it affected us in a way. And I see my children, how it affected my children. My children are very clingy now.
Yeah.
Clingy. You know, my mother's very clingy. You know, and they wish me well. They want to help as much as they can financially, but they can't because they have their own lives to live. Coming home, seeing my children as fathers now, as mothers now, and seeing my grandchildren and meeting them and getting the bond with them is humbling. It's blessing. It's a blessing, but I see the trauma up close and personal that we, you know, it's not a disconnect, but it's kind of a distance. You know,
my brother said the only thing he was guilty of was putting his family through this shit.
Absolutely, I completely agree with him, man.
He said that's the only thing I'm guilty of, Chuck, and that has torn him up, and he's tried to push me away so many times.
Absolutely,
but I've had to explain to him
because
my
of the
brother
love for you, his love for you, Charles. He don't want. He know the enemy that we up against, and he see that you out here, you know, right here in their face. And he knows it's a dangerous space for you to be in, brother. And
that's my ministry. My ministry is that of justice.
Absolutely. And I want to say this, man, before I get off of here with y'all. Next time you talk to your brother, man, send him my salutations, man, and my you know, my blessings, man.
Yeah. I am that of a man of justice.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I stand with him.
I don't want to get in the way of all this, but it's, you know, it's an honor to be here with you guys today here on Wrongful Conviction Day. You know, Death Penalty Action is just putting this out here, this bit of raw emotion. Really, we want people to understand. You know, and these are both in situations where there isn't a full exoneration. Right? There's a commutation in Charles's brother's case. There's a freed but took a plea in Lamont's case. These are wrongful convictions too. And you know, and I want to say none of us are lawyers, so we're not speaking with any authority in terms of the law. We all have our experiences, and I'm not doubting anything that anybody has said. Just, you know, technically, we want to make sure we're not owning anything that may have been slightly misspoken. I don't even know. I do that regularly, and I want to make sure that we're clear. We're going to wind this down. I want to share one more video that we have with another person that is exonerated. That's Derek Jameson. We're all pulling for Derek because he did 20 years on Ohio's death row and for a crime that he had nothing to do with, and he's not been compensated. But we're actually pulling for him because he's got some lawyers working to see if we can't get him some compensation. But when we made this film, Derek was living in Florida in a hotel room and just trying to scrape by. We've been able to move him back up to Cincinnati and to be able to help him quite a bit. But let me just share this with you, and then we'll come back and offer some final thoughts. And by the way, these videos you can find on the Death Penalty Action YouTube channel. Look for the playlist, and I'll put it in the chat also. Look for the playlist for the people versus the death penalty. So here comes that. Oh, whoops. Now, where did I put that? Oh, here we are.
The only people that get the death penalty in America are poor whites, poor blacks, and poor Hispanics. You'd never see a rich person get the death penalty in the United States. I hear you, baby. I hear you. Daddy back, daddy back, daddy back, daddy back. I got one of the worst cases in American history. The prosecutor and the homicide detective withheld 35 pieces of evidence. I never lost hope. You know, I knew I was coming home. I knew I was innocent. My mom always told me there's only one way to treat people, and that's good. 1985 was the last time I hugged my mom. When I was sent to die in Ohio electric chair. They changed the killing technique. They changed it from electrocuting you, burning you up, to shooting poison in your arm. The chief medical staff, they all come to your cell, and I remember looking at my arms and stuff to see if I have good veins so they could shoot the poison into me. I wasn't in jail. Millions of other people around the world was in jail. I was in hell. I was actually in hell. It's traumatizing, you know? It's traumatizing to family and friends. I lost my mom and my dad when I was on death row. But my brothers and sisters, they still had to carry on, you know? I couldn't imagine. It wasn't nothing they could do to help. Put up against the government, it couldn't help me. Could nobody help me? I was just stranded on death row, you know? They came to kill me 6 times in Ohio. I got a stay. I got a last minute stay. It was horrible. It was horrible. It was inhumane. I gotta wait to see if I'm gonna die or not. I watch guys on death row actually lose their mind.
See you right, Lucky. Bye-bye. Oh. Bye.
Well, when I get rich, when I become a millionaire, that's the first person I come to see. Right here. This my girl right here. She makes sure I'm all right, and I'm doing this amazing work because of people like her to help me.
Hi, sweetie.
Look, this is my friend right here. This was my buddy. Ever since I was a kid, I always had this magic touch with making friends. You gotta make friends, because that's the only people you know are the people you're on death row with. My best friend, he sat right across from me. You know, we called him Little Flip. But the day I was walking out for death row, they were killing my best friend, you know? That was my little guy, that was my cat, you know? That was my family, that was all I had. Should nobody have a right to say who should live or die? We need now in the United States, all around the world, we need to show more love and compassion toward humanity. And I would want no other man, woman, or children to experience what I went through. And it's still happening to this day. They're still sentencing people to die, you know? Yeah, I've been through hell and back, but I'm here now, you know, and I'm trying to save my friends and people that's been wrongfully convicted and horrible miscarriage of justice, you know? Up to shooting poison in your arm.
And we're back. We're going to wind it down. I'll put the link into to that video there, and into the chat on the Facebook, the Death Penalty Action, and also to all the videos, and to Derek's GoFundMe as well. So it's Wrongful. There you go. Lamont's got it on the T-shirt. It's Wrongful Convictions Day. We wanted to add to the mix a little bit this conversation with Lamont Hunter, Charles Keith. Guys, I want to give you each a couple minutes to make a final plea for people. What do people need to do? What do they need to know? You know, we're going to keep talking about this. We're going to keep being out there. That's what Death Penalty Action does. But today we just wanted to add this. So Charles, you want to go first? You're muted.
We have an event that's called Starting for Justice. You know, that's really intrigued me because it's so many different organizations. I would love to see all the death penalty organizations across the United States, all the exonerees and all the families standing there at the courthouse pointing at that sign where it says equal justice for under law, and everybody get a good laugh. But I'd like to see that gathering of people there, you know, just it's so symbolic, just to show them how big of a joke and a farce that statement is.
All righty, and let's see, Lamont.
Sure. Thanks, Abe. I want to say first, stop executions now. Thanks, Abe, for these T-shirts. I wear them proudly. I support abolition across the board for any and all crime. But we got to stop this, man. People need to be more educated and informed about this madness. And sadly, the people that get it are the ones who are actually touched by this, like myself and my family, Brother Charles and his family. Hey, the work you do is humbling. I appreciate you, and I stand in solidarity with organizations, ours, yours, ours, the DPA, and all organizations that fight to abolish the death penalty around the world. And education, man. Educated. Get informed. Get involved, man. Get involved and get informed, man, because people are dying. Innocent people are dying by the hands of these jurisdictions around this country and the world. And it's unfair. And you have to understand how it affects the loved ones of people, the victims as well, the victims' families as well. Some victims' families don't support the death penalty, but jurisdictions still go ahead and fight to execute an innocent person or not. We just got to stop this madness. People get informed, get educated. You can. I speak. I'm available to speak. I love. I'm passionate about this, telling my story, and hopefully I reach a person and it sparks something in whoever listening. Get involved and get educated.
And shout out to Antoinette Jones, the Jones family, the coalition.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you both. I do want to share one more video that'll just be our closing thing, and that is another one of these people versus the death penalty videos that we've made. There's a whole string of them. We've got 8 of them so far. If we have the funding, we would make a bunch more. But we've got these 8, and this last one is Herman Lindsay, who's a friend of ours. He's the executive director of Witness to Innocence, the organization of exonerated and soon to also be of the freed from death row. So they're working on that. That's an important project that Herman has taken on to bring that, because Witness to Innocence was originally created specifically for people who've been exonerated. But like we were talking about, there's a lot of people that are like Lamont who took a plea in order to walk out today and not risk reconviction, another wrongful conviction. So in any case, they're working on that. But here's a video about Herman Lindsay, and we encourage you all to go to the webpage of Witness to Innocence and make a donation today in honor, or any day, in honor of Wrongful Conviction Day, and to help what that group does, which is very important, which puts out the voices of the people who are death row survivors front and center into this conversation, because we know when it comes to shaping and ending the death penalty in all the states where we've abolished the death penalty during those final floor vote debates, that's the most common thing. People come and say, you know, I don't want to ever risk executing the innocent. They say the victim family people came and saw me, and the wrongly convicted people came and saw me, and that's why I'm voting to abolish the death penalty. So, so with that, I want to thank everybody, and then just watch this next video before you go. And you know, it's powerful stuff, and we're grateful to be able to push it out. And you can find this on our YouTube page, and I'll put the link into the chat there. So here we go.
They treat you like a number, like you're a lump, you know. But some of the guards, actually, when they're walking you to medical or whatever, you're chained down. When they're walking down the aisle, they'll tell people to move to the side, dead man walking. Move to the side, dead man walking. You know, and you know, it's a traumatizing thing, you know, because they constantly remind you that you're finna die. I always had to take my mind somewhere. I wasn't the type of person to sit there and dwell on what happened. Even now, when I'm going to sleep, sometimes I have to imagine myself in a story to relax my mind, or otherwise the anxiety is so high that I develop over there. COVID really affected me real bad, and I make all my income through speaking, like most exonerees. This is where I spend a lot of my time at. You know, I have my laptop here. I can deal with the normal man's struggle if it's a struggle just because that's the way life is. The state wrongfully put me in prison and charged me and then released me and don't want to fix it because guess what? I'm still being punished for something I didn't do. I've been looking for jobs for years. This job I just started with, Witness Sentence, was the first job I done had since I've been home. My background check be ran, and I have that murder on the background. I get slammed. Even when I'm trying to rent properties, even life insurance, even Airbnb's accounts. I help a lot of people that's addicts. Just like people think that people convicted of a felony or people on death row are animals and they're not human, they feel that same way about addicts. One of the biggest things about rehabilitation, if you don't have a support, you're not gonna make it. And most of the places that for rehabilitation, they be trying to do this army drill stuff when that's not what the person needed. It's a big burden, but everybody feel like I'm Dr. Phil around here. I've been very successful to have some rehabilitate and living a normal life right now and then. I've lost a lot of them through overdose, and that's a painful thing also. All 7 Florida Supreme judges ruled unanimously that there was no evidence that even linked me to the scene. And everything that he used against me was more proof of my innocence than my guilt. When I got out of death row, I went to National Paralegal College, got my bachelor's degree in legal studies. So I went and got a mitigation, a training, privatized certification, but I can't get the license because I don't have my rights back.
Why? But this is your life, though.
Welcome to Florida. The great vacation state. Florida leads the nation in death row exonerees, right? That's 30 death row exonerees. Out of those 30 death row exonerees, only 2 been compensated. The state create victims such as myself. They just put you out back into society.
You know, that leaves me with the question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
That question is, who does the death penalty protect? What people does the death penalty protect?
Nobody.
No more so than incarceration, that's for sure.
No.
It's Wrongful Convictions Day, everybody. Thanks for watching and being a part of today's program. And you can find all the links in the chat on the Death Penalty Action Facebook page. And, you know, watch for the next actions. There's 2 executions coming up on the 17th of October, one of whom is a guy just like Lamont, no crime occurred. dead child, somebody had to go, no crime occurred. That's Robbie
I grew up
Robertson.
on
Find
a
the
small
petition on our
farm.
Facebook and webpage.
There's a lot of